The Blast from Our Past Network.
I'm Richard Stanley. I'm writer, filmmaker, and anthropologist, and I'm with Zach and Corey podcasting after dark.
Welcome to our Patreon exclusive interview series for Podcasting After Dark with your hosts, Corey Stevenson and Zach Schaefer. Tonight's interview is the director of Hardware, Dust Devil, and Color Out of Space, Richard Stanley.
On a personal note, I just wanted to tell you that before we started doing this podcast, and my wife can attest to this, like 4 years ago, I told her that I said, if all that comes out of this podcast is I get to interview Richard Stanley one day, I will die a happy man. Now, I'm sure she was like, well, I hope you make some money doing this. But I was like, all I hope is... So thank you, sir. Thank you for doing this. Our mutual friend, Juana, I've never actually met before. Met her on Instagram. She told me to say hi and thank you her for setting all this up. But thank you so much for taking the time to do this with us.
It's a pleasure, sir. Well, that's all thanks to the pluses and minuses of the interconnected world.
Yes,
no doubt about that. And by the way, I'm digging your mustache on a personal level as well, because I've always tried to grow a mustache like that, and I cannot. So there you go.
Yeah, it's hard. It's taken a few years for it to come out right.
How are you feeling, by the way? Are you over the COVID, or are you still having some lingering effects?
Yeah, still having lingering effects. We were just hit by some kind of mutant strain of COVID. I'm not even sure what to call it this year. And it feels like there's a lot of it around, especially over here in Europe. But it's weird because COVID's out of fashion, so technically it kind of doesn't exist. No one's wearing masks, and
Right.
No one's calling it a pandemic. But we've definitely all got it. It's kind of phasing out, but it's still, a wee bit trippy, like having one's drink spiked for a bit of lightweight ecstasy or something.
Yeah. I had it a couple of months ago, and it's not fun. And my mom's traveling. Actually, my mom, I think, is in the same time zone as you are. She's over in France right now, so she's visiting over there, and I hope she comes back safe and everything, especially with all the stuff that's happening right now.
Yeah, whereabouts are you guys?
Oh, Zach is in Los Angeles, and I am in Oregon, right outside of Portland.
Okay, so yeah, a very distant time zone.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I'm currently staring at a fog-induced view of the ocean. I'm in Santa Monica, so the fog has rolled in, and John Houseman is playing in my head from John Carpenter's The Fog, right? So
yeah, very nice. I've got some very good memories of Santa Monica in the fog.
Do you? Yeah, it's beautiful. It's a little creepy too.
Yeah, it has that.
I used to be a kindergarten teacher, and we would get big gusts of fog rolling in near our classroom, and I keep the door open. And one day the fog's just rolling in, and the kids are like, "Look at the fog!" And then I went into the monologue from the fog, and I said, "It's 2:55." And so I started going to the whole thing, and the kids were terrified. They're like, "Is that real?" I go, "You'll have to find out." And I got inundated with a bunch of emails from parents like, "What is this story you told our kids?" I'm sorry. So
It's good to help. Yeah, I think he does.
It is a pleasure having you on our show, though. And obviously, Corey and I are huge fans. Corey chose Hardware and Color Out of Space to break down scene by scene. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but we broke those movies down scene by scene.
Yeah, that was Hardware was we started the show back 4 years ago. Zach and I, the way we do the show is we each pick a movie every other week. My first movie was Heavy Metal, just because that's so near and dear to my heart. But my second movie that I broke down for the show was Hardware, and I've been in love with that movie since it came out in 1990. My friend group all love it. We've all have this bond over Hardware, and it was amazing to sort of just bring it to the show and hear fans' reactions to it. There's a huge cult follow. I mean, you know it. Who are we talking to? There's a huge cult following for Hardware.
Yeah, pleased to hear it. I mean, I'm sorry that the 21st century's turned out to be so hardware-esque. I mean,
Right.
it's really just coming from the fact I was always terrified of the time period we're living in now. I guess as I was fearing it as early as the 80s. Um, so it's kind of caught up for us. But I'm also a big heavy metal fan.
Yeah.
Yeah, something I'd dearly love to see, just putting it out there, is a new anthology along similar lines using present day VFX and animation techniques, because there's just so much that can be done going into that material. And I'd love to see a new anthology along those lines, even readapting some of the same original material. The Mobius, Dan O'Bannon, Long Tomorrow, or the Richard Corbin Den saga, etc. There's still so much life in that original material.
Well, we reviewed Jodorowsky's Dune, that documentary, and one of the things we were hoping to see is maybe them do an animated version of Jodorowsky's Dune one day. I think the animation could pull it off spectacularly.
Yeah, it's certainly been talked about a lot. And I don't know whether it's a rights issue or why no one's actually gone there, but it's, yeah, potentially within striking distance. Maybe it's some kind of terrible, yeah, irony that you're only allowed to recreate people's dream works after they're dead or something, and they're all just holding their breath. But certainly the storyboards are all there, and yeah, it's possible to recreate.
Going back to what you just said, though, I literally wrote down your quote from the No Flesh Will Be Spared documentary, which came out in 2009. And you said that you were afraid to be alive in the next 20 years because we're heading towards the hardware universe. And that was 14 years ago. Do you see that we're still on track for that, for that prophecy right there?
Well, I don't really see it as a prophecy. It's really just kind of bad attitude, and I just assumed that, yeah, anything that we invented or any technological improvements would be used against us. Wouldn't necessarily end up being to our benefit. I want to be more of an optimist about technology. I mean, I would wish that, yeah, drones and AI didn't mean that we'd end up with inevitably with drone soldiers. I would like to believe in the liberatory potential of the technosphere, and the fact that we can reach out across continents, and that this would in fact increase our personal freedom. But in effect, it's kind of gone the other way, and that it's made it much easier for everyone to know one's business, to get into one's bank account, to somehow yeah, take one's income faster than you can bring it in, etc. It hasn't quite worked out in our favor. And then there's lots of little things in hardware, like the legalization of yeah, of the freely available government monopoly marijuana, which is kind of, yeah, legally given to the people as almost like a prescription drug to keep everyone asleep. The gradual slide of the environment into something which is, yeah, unstable and unlivable without any real need for a seismic Third World War or any one particular event. Yeah, setting it off, and yeah, I guess the gradual slide into, yeah, totalitarianism, which is also a shadow haunting hardware.
Yeah, I mean, it's, again, I've watched hardware probably once a year since 1990, and
It's your Christmas
yeah,
movie.
exactly,
I'm kidding.
exactly. It's a Christmas movie.
No.
And I pick up on so many things, so many new things each time I watch it, and I showed it to my wife for the first time yet last night, just prepping and everything like that, and she loved it. So a first time viewing in 2023, she thought it was amazing. That movie stands the test of time, and Zach's mentioned it before that it demands repeat viewing. But like one thing that I noticed, when I was younger and sort of as times changed, I always thought, the character of Lincoln, was sort of stuck in that time frame. But now, as we're moving, like you just said, how we're all aware of what each other's doing, I was like, oh my God, Link is so much more accurate now, except he's not looking through an actual high powered lens. He's stalking you through Facebook, through Instagram, and all this kind of stuff. So I just feel like Hardware is one of those movies that can just adapt and fit into any time frame that people view it in, and I think that it's still relevant in every time frame.
Yeah, I mean, I guess also I've just had a lifelong fear of inanimate objects kind of getting up and moving by themselves, which is I recognize as irrational. But there's something about the whir of servo motors that has, given me goosebumps and set my teeth on edge ever since I was a kid. I've always had a kind of inescapable nightmare that sooner or later the drone soldiers would be coming for me.
I mean, I'm not gonna lie. When I was a kid too, maybe it was me seeing that bad. Well, that's not bad. The Michael Crichton movie Runaway, and seeing little mechanical spiders moving around and going, "Is that real? Could that really happen?" And just the idea of like technology. I think that's, as a child, with your imagination all over the place, everything's open, an open book. Envisioning anything coming to life, but then taking that idea as an adult and making something out of it makes it even more terrifying.
Yeah, I mean, I guess Crichton's material stands up pretty good after all this time as well.
Right.
Maybe it's somewhat more optimistic, but a lot of things which slipped by me in his stuff when I was first watching it back in the day, like the stealing people's images and getting them to basically act after they're dead, like in Looker and things, all seem to have come home to roost at various points.
Right. Oh my
It's almost like
gosh.
all these dystopian movies from the 80s and 90s were actually roadmaps and not cautionary tales.
Well, I guess yeah. By looking on the dark side, one tends to, I guess, be score more hits and being optimistic. I wanted as a kid to believe that faster than light travel and first contact and kind of some kind of galactic federation might be part of my future. But I've never fully believed it. It's in my dark heart. I've always imagined I'd end up, trapped in the apartment block in Hardware.
Yeah, which is it's its own sort of nightmare. Even though you create these worlds, we've seen it like Zach in Shivers, Cronenberg Shivers and whatnot. This idea of building these apartment complexes, and Demons too. These apartment complexes where everything you need is right there. And I feel like Wendy's sort of apartment in Hardware is sort of similar, but then us as humans, we need to get out, we need to be a part of things and everything, and I feel like it's such an unnatural state for her, but I see why she's doing it and why it's important for the story. But it's also a terrifying prospect of that's the future that we're going to be moving towards.
Yeah, I guess increasingly so. Although for Hardware, it was also a budgetary consideration, in that Bava's Demons and Michele Soavi's Stage Fright were big influences in that they came immediately before Hardware. Showed us all clearly that if we could contain the action to a single location, we had a chance of pulling it off. I've always dreamed of trying to return to the Hardware world, but the rights to the story are so conflicted that trying to get everyone who claims to own Hardware around the same table to agree is made it very difficult for me to ever make it out of the apartment building and show more of the world they're in.
Well, hopefully that'll happen. If it doesn't, we have so much of your other work to cherish and appreciate. And I know, for one, my first introduction to your career was seeing Dust Devil when I was a kid. And not a kid, but, teenager, whatever. And Corey, you it's fairly newish for you to revisit Dust Devil.
Yeah,
right?
I watched it when it first came out, but it didn't connect with me the way Hardware did until recently. I revisited Dust Devil recently, and I was like, oh my god, like I love this movie, and it caused me to just think about how we should all revisit stories and anything over our years, because what might not be ready for us when we're 12 or 14, it might be made for us when we're 45 years old and we can appreciate what's there. And I I know that Dust Devil, there's your cut versus their cut. Unfortunately, in the U.S., the only version is that I could find and everything is the U.S. cut, which is about an hour and 26 minutes. My question to you is, I know that that Dust Devil and Hardware is not like sort of how you envisioned it from the beginning, but they still resonate with the viewer and in the form that they're in. And I don't know if I would want anything different, obviously. But how do you like reconcile that conflict of knowing like what you wanted to originally have versus what came out, and then still having people love what came out, though? I don't know if I'm asking a question there, and I'm sorry.
You are.
Well, I guess it's more like a process in that, Hardware's soundtrack, the "This is what you want, this is what you get," the
Love that song.
the John Lydon track that we ended up using as pretty much the main theme song, was something I just played every day in rushes initially.
Okay.
Because it was every day it was we want what we wanted one thing, but we were getting we were getting something else. That was clearly demonstrated all the way through. But I think if you're flexible enough to take advantage of what that other thing is that's happening at the same time, and channel it fully, then it brings the beast to life. I mean, if you're just going to execute the scripts and the storyboards, it's going to kind of be perfect but lifeless. So the crazy fractured nature of the shooting process was, I think often helped with their personalities.
This is a slight deviation, but you bringing up "This is what you want, this is what you get." That's on my workout playlist, by the way, and I wanted to ask you, musically, what artists or songs like drive you? What are certain is it that style of music that you're ultimately attracted to?
Well, I think that swings with the project. I mean,
Okay.
having had a career at one point in music videos, my sense of what it was that I personally liked got pretty much thrown out of the window, because there was a period of several years when we were pretty much having to shoot one music video a month to break even. And at that point in time, personal preference kind of becomes less relevant. But on Color Out of Space, obviously beyond the Colin Stetson score, I was also
Which
pushing
was brilliant.
into a lot of Scandinavian black metal material. Um,
Oh, cool.
Thanks to all the stuff that's on Lavinia's headphones in color, and that
Yeah.
definitely something I'd like to lean into further, because there's a lot of bands out there, I think, who are undergoing for me, very interesting mutation at the moment, and kind of somewhere between metal and full shamanic yeah um magical ritualistic material, which I would definitely like to go further with.
That's cool. That's cool. I mean, Bodie, my son, but his name is Bodie. I would say that he's definitely been a muse of mine ever since he was born, and he's very magical in many ways. But Corey was the first person to kind of turn me on to magic, citing you as actually an example when we first met each other way back when in 2014. Um, can you talk about your background with magic and how you got so connected to it?
Well, and it's scarcely a secret, but I owe most of my problems on that front to my mother, because my mom was an anthropologist, Penny Miller, who wrote a great big fat book called Myths and Legends of Southern Africa, which was something she was cooking up in the earliest years of my life. I think it landed when I was about 6. But for the first 5 years or so of my life, she was busy writing it and researching it. So I was being dragged around from one remote area of Africa to another, with meeting a lot of different, extremely strange tribal people, and always seeking out the what we'd now call a traditional healer. What in those days we would have called a sangoma or a witch doctor, as the font of wisdom. And I guess up to about 6 years old, when I first started going to school, I had no real norm to compare that to. So it was very easy to believe in a what we'd now see as I guess, a magical universe, and that all that stuff seemed real to me. It took a bit of time and a bit of unlearning at school to realize that other folk didn't necessarily believe that there were, say, invisible people living in the riverbeds who had magic pebbles that they kept in their mouths, or any of these strange concepts that had been, I guess, impressed on me as a very young kid. But then,
That's
yeah, you go, sir.
no. I was gonna say that is the perfect age though to be tapping into that, in my opinion, because I feel like as we get older, it gets diluted. We can become more cynical, more adverse to that open-mindedness. And at that age, it's such a pure open time, and that you're exposed to it. It's really interesting.
Yeah, so I guess that gave me a bit of a head start, and then it's been something that's yeah, it always interested me there afterwards, mostly in terms of trying to find demonstrable proofs of the supernatural, the unknown, the slippy way that it seems to yeah, interact with our reality.
Yeah, no, and a lot of these concepts you put into Dust Devil. Was that a project? Was that project more near and dear to your heart than Hardware was?
I wouldn't say so, but Dust Devil was maybe the first screenplay I ever tried to write. It was born when I was about 16 years old, and it was written before Hardware. And I was initially hoping to shoot it in South Africa, and I think the logic behind it was what was the easiest thing we could shoot, utilizing the landscape and maybe two characters and a red Volkswagen, and tried to come up with something that we could shoot locally. So I think it's yeah, very much informed by yeah, African mythology and yeah, regional witchcraft, as well as the emotional temperature of the country at that point in time. There's got to be a reason that the devil has blonde hair and blue eyes in Dust Devil. And it's
Yeah.
kind of in South Africa, they had very extreme censorship under the Dutch Reformed Church. Almost everything was banned. Political movies, films like Cry Freedom or Dry White Season were actually released, and we saw them at school. But under the Dutch Reformed Church, The Exorcist was banned, The Omen was banned, David Cronenberg's Scanners was banned, even Joe Dante's The Howling was banned, Rocky Horror Picture Show was banned. People went to jail for having VHSs of Rocky Horror Picture Show. Heavy Metal comic book was banned. So
Wow.
yeah, there was a distinct prejudice against yeah, weird stuff in general, and anything that was had specifically to do with the devil. They really hated 70s devil movies. When Frankenstein and the Monster from Hell, the last Peter Cushing Frankenstein movie, was released, so they went over the print and took out the words "from hell" with a felt tip marker pen, so that the print
What?
had read Frankenstein and the Monster, and then there was this little blot next to it jumping up and down, covering the words "from hell."
Oh my gosh.
So there was
Wow.
kind of an intent to try to make a home devil movie, an indigenous. The sense was that as we weren't allowed to have devil movies, we thought, well, can we make our own devil movie? And,
My
Right.
my favorite line from that movie is when he says, "You have to stop thinking like a white man and start thinking like a man." And I was like, that's amazing. And I do. I mean, he was Dust Devil was. I love that movie. I think it's absolutely amazing. The one shot where he actually brings the wind forward, he kind of turns around and grabs something out of the air. Is that symbolizing him actually grabbing something on the other side and killing it before he like sort of creates the wind like that?
Yeah, I guess he's creating some kind of, I don't know, portal or tearing a hole in reality. It's a very long time since we shot that, and it was yeah, it's done with a I know we did it for contrapuntal zoom, where we tracked in and zoomed out at the same time to squash the perspective, and simultaneously blasted him with turbines from a jet engine.
It's I mean, it's an amazing shot. I rewound it like 4 times. I was like, just his movements and the camera angle. I loved it. I thought it was absolutely amazing.
Well, I hope you find a full copy of the thing. Try and seek out that director's cut. It's different.
Yeah, I have it in my Amazon cart. It's like $50, and I don't have a region-free player. But
I have it.
So,
I have it.
okay. I'm thinking about pick.
I'll send
my
it.
Okay.
friend, you've got my permission to run dubs. But
I'll let him borrow it. I'll let you borrow it,
Yeah.
Corey.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I did have a question because you mentioned color out of space. One of our listeners, Rob, he has 2 questions. One of them is kind of an easy one. What is your favorite Lovecraft story?
Well, that would depend on my mood. I mean, the very first Lovecraft story I ever met was Dream Quest for Unknown Kadath, which my mum read to me when I was a kid. So I've got particularly warm feelings towards some of that material. But beyond that, all of the major stories have a similar habit to, as you were saying about rewatching films that one saw when one's young. I reread and reread those stories. They've changed as I've gotten older. They don't really entirely stay the same. So different aspects of loomed out of the weave of Lovecraft's writing, which has really rewarded continuous textual scholarship. I've found very tiny things that in just a few words sometimes that have really altered my perception of the stories. Whisper and Darkness has been looming very large in my life lately, just because of the area I'm living in, and that's one I return to quite a lot. I think I read the whole thing out loud the other day.
And I do want to talk to you about the other world and that documentary and everything. But Rob has one more question, and it's about the Voice of the Moon. He asks, would you ever consider like doing a follow-up, like maybe going back to the same place and sort of seeing how it is and everything? Or was that just a moment in time for you?
Well, it was definitely a very distinct moment in time. Voice of the Moon's the film we shot during in fact, 2 trips we made into Afghanistan at the tail end of the 80s. And yeah, we were super lucky to have done that. It's I never got as far into the mountains as I wanted to get. Essentially, people have a problem shooting Afghanistan just because of electricity. All of the electronic news gathering equipment needs to be recharged from car cigarette lighters, which means that people tend to stick to the roads, which tend to run through the flattest, driest, most boring parts of the country. But once you get into the Hindu Kush, there's mountains that, roll into the Karakorums, into the Kashkud Mountains, and off into the Himalayas. And between all those mountains are river valleys and cedar forests and places that have never been electrified, where there's never been really a written language, where dialects vary from valley to valley. So I've never been able to penetrate as far as I would have liked into that world. And that certainly there's still people who are, living in the same circumstances as, the time of Christ or before. And the natural pattern of life is, much the same. And I know there's stuff in there which nobody knows about. There's archaeological and, geological things in there which no one's ever really seen or photographed. So the lure is strong, but since the 80s, of course, we've had the whole business of 9/11 and the war on terror. So our everyone's geopolitical allegiances have changed. Back in those days, all the folk I was with were unified because everyone was essentially against Russia and against communism. So yeah, the US and the UK and Pakistan and the people who are going to turn into the Taliban and the guerrilla movements and the CIA and the intelligence services were all in lockstep, more or less, on the same side. Now it's all hyper divided. So you're super dangerous, I think, for a Westerner to penetrate into those same places. I would love to go back and round about the immediate aftermath of 9/11, lobbied hard to try and get myself back to Kabul and to try and get another documentary off the ground. And it's still very, very difficult material to get near.
A lot of
I can imagine.
No, I was just saying a lot of logistics. Go ahead, Zach.
A lot of logistics, but I think also too you're hitting on something that that resonates with me. So much of this world that we are unfamiliar with, don't know about, and I always go back to this kind of childlike perspective. I remember seeing Aguirre, Wrath of God, when I was like 10 years old, and just fell in love with the visuals. Didn't necessarily understand everything I was watching, but that movie really resonated with me, and it made me curious about the world around us that we just don't know about, right? And how many places, especially living in the United States, how many places can you go where there is zero electricity, there is zero magnetic fields, right? That you can feel or hear around you. And I mean, I really hope, on a personal note, I really hope that you get to shoot there someday or follow up, because I think the world needs to see these things. I think kids need to see these things to expose themselves. Like your mom sounds rad, by the way. The fact that she exposed you to so much at a young age, mythologically, archaeology wise, is just fascinating. And I think the more we do that for younger people, the more it opens up their wanting of more knowledge of the world versus being closed-minded. I don't know if that makes sense to you or not, but that's where I'm at.
Yeah, no, it does make a lot of sense. I mean, Lovecraft and everything else is really about the fear of the unknown.
Right.
Yeah, pushing into the unknown. Much of that fear tends to evaporate once we get a better understanding of what the heck it is that we're actually dealing with.
There's a great kids book. I think it's called In the Dark, about a little kid who wakes up in the middle of the night and hears a voice calling him, saying, come closer, right? And the whole house is dark, and it's leading him to the basement. And he gets down into the basement, and he's saying, I'm here, pull the drawer open, I'm here. And the whole thing leads up to this idea of when he opens up the drawer, it's a light bulb talking to him. And he uses the light bulb, and suddenly the place is illuminated, and it's beautiful. But leading up to that point, as a reader, you're terrified because of this unknown with this mysterious voice leading you in, right? And I think, Lovecraft resonates with me for sure as well, because so much of his magical storytelling that he does was written at a time when, like, I think it still holds up today. You just said you read the last story you just read out loud. And I think that's important, too, to read stories out loud. It gives a whole other voice when you do that. That's very powerful.
I think HBL stands up better and better. A lot of his ideas are only just beginning to make sense, given what we now know about the physical universe.
Right. Yeah. Right. We broke down Color Out of Space. Like I said, Corey masterfully did it scene by
Great
scene,
movie.
and I think we talked about it for 3.5 hours or something.
It's one of our longer ones.
Right. But it's just visually striking. Like, it is such a beautiful film.
Even the horrors, the horrors in it are beautiful. Sorry, Zach, I mean to cut you off.
No. Continue, Corey.
But there's beauty in horror in that movie, and I love horror movies like that, where there is beauty not in the carnage, but there's beauty in the monstrosity, and I think that movie pulls it off very well.
Ah, mercy. No, it's something I very much believe in real life. I mean, beyond the fact that beauty also kind of knows no morality and that just terrible things can be, yeah, extraordinarily beautiful at the same time as being utterly terrible. But,
Right.
Well, I mean, I don't want to bring it back to Hardware, but I mean, Moe's death is one of the most beautiful death scenes I think in a movie ever filmed, and there's so much reason behind it. There's so much to it. But that is another example of like there is beauty. Beauty can be found in horror like that, and I think Moe's death is another example of that.
oh, thank you. It's praise indeed.
Well,
Mm.
and I know that he didn't turn out the way you sort of wrote him to begin with, but I don't know if that death would have resonated if he had been any different than who he was. Even my wife was like, that was amazing. I was like, I know, right? Like, that death scene is insanely awesome. And, it's because you care about the character, but it's also the editing. It's seeing the Mark 13 do its thing. Like, it's gaining power while Moe's dying and just the camera's moving in and his voice is echoing. And, oh, my God, it's amazing. And I'm kind of gushing right now, and I apologize, but it's a beautiful death scene. I'm comparing it to because I watched something the other night where a big budget movie where the main character you're supposed to care about dies, and it was kind of goofy and it was kind of lifeless, and I felt nothing. And then I watched Hardware last night and I felt everything I was supposed to feel when Moe died. And I'm just like, this is amazing. This is what cinema can do.
Praise indeed, sir.
I have no question there. There's nothing there.
Let's talk about
Yes,
Otherworld,
let's-
though, or The Otherworld, because that is a project that was very near and dear to your heart, right?
Well, it was kind of an accident, but it was most of my films are accidents, and that was no exception. I had a cinematographer friend staying with me who was kind of going through a hard time and had all his equipment with him. As a result, we started shooting little bits and pieces, interviewing the neighbors and climbing up the mountain and taking occasional shots. Yeah, after we had about 20 minutes of scintillating material, a producer friend in Paris, Fabrice Lambeau, gave us 20 grand to bring it up to feature length. But there was no real intention at the beginning to shoot a movie. We were simply documenting the place we were in and the people who were around at the time. And given that everything that's happened and the fact that three-quarters of the people in the other world are now dead, means that I'm super grateful we had that opportunity to capture that. And over the last 10 years, a lot has moved on, but yeah, the shadow of all the things that were going to happen are kind of present in the warp and weave of the little documentary that we shot back in the day.
And were
yes,
were you shooting the Secret Glory when you sort of stumbled upon that?
yeah, it came out. It was the result, I guess, of chasing down the Otto Rahn story in Secret Glory. Really, a series of things happened. In the early 90s, I was commissioned by Channel 4 Television to research a projected documentary on the backstory to Raiders of the Lost Ark. And they dispatched me to Europe to see if there was any truth to the story that the Third Reich had been after the Ark of the Covenant, the Holy Grail, the Spear of Longinus, or any of these mythical biblical artifacts. Then endowed with the funds from Channel 4, I got on the trail and found a pretty good Grail story. Found this character of Otto Wilhelm Rahn, the German Jewish Grail historian who ended up working for the SS and who tried to track the treasure of the ages to the Pyrenees, to the mountains of southern France, and while all the executives at Channel 4 assumed this was an example of the insanity of the Nazis, I felt a need to kick the tires on Otto's story and went to the places that he described in his text. And I guess that set me off down a trail. In the course of it, I met maybe 20 people who had known Otto personally and were able to tell me the story firsthand. When Channel 4 television lost interest in the material and didn't want to proceed with the documentary, and my different informants started dying of old age, because really that period of time, the 1990s, was the last time that anyone who was an adult or in a command position in World War II was still really functional or available to be interviewed to begin with. So I felt that the compulsion to just for the record to cover the material and to myself anyway, which is how Secret Glory got going. And in the course of shooting Secret Glory, which had a number of odd folk involved. I mean, the principal camera operator was Pascal Laugier, who later made that film Martyrs. So
wow, okay.
It was an odd shoot, Secret Glory. Where I got to meet the mountain of Montsegur and some of the towns and mountains here in the region, and obviously it held on to me because I'm still here.
I was going to ask, is that where you're located now?
Yeah, no, I moved here full time and back in the beginning of the 21st century.
Okay. And just to let our listeners know, The Other World is on Tubi, and I highly recommend it. It's a very awesome documentary. And I don't know, I mean, people can watch the documentary and everything. I don't know how much you want to talk about the event with the lady that came out of the shadows and everything like that. But one thing I wanted to ask you, because you mentioned in the documentary, after that event and after that night, you kind of went back and you were trying to work on other things, but everything else sort of felt lesser than, like it just felt less important now because of it. So my question to you is, how do you live with the epiphany? Like when things of this nature happen, and they happen to all of us. Sometimes we don't even notice it, but sometimes amazing things like this will happen. And then you have to live with that epiphany. Your life has to keep on, going. You have to keep doing things, even though you want to focus on this other thing. Now, you had a chance to actually make a documentary on it and sort of dive into it. But like, is it dependent on the person? Is it dependent on the size of the epiphany? Is it dependent on the interest level? Like, how do you move past that?
Yeah, it's very, very tricky when your day-to-day life is interrupted by a supernatural event, whether it's seeing a UFO or experiencing the living presence of Jesus or Buddha. It's tricky then to readjust to the so-called real world. And I've always been heavily motivated by trying to figure out whether consciousness survives death and whether there's proof of the supernatural world. So obviously, I trailed the carrot of being verifiable proof or some form of evidence I could latch onto. And in comparison with that, everything else that I was doing did seem like a waste of time. It seemed to make more sense to try to swim directly towards the mystery and to try to penetrate it or understand it better. And of course, that kind of thinking can get you into a lot of trouble because there's any number of folk who, after seeing a UFO or having some kind of inexplicable experience, end up having their lives fully derailed, like the Richard Dreyfuss character in Close Encounters. You have a high likelihood of losing your partner, your family, your job, and plunging into the hell of insanity and bankruptcy. So it's
I think people forget that too, by the way, because they go, "Oh, Close Encounters, it's Spielberg, it's a PG film, it's so cute." And like, no, Richard Dreyfuss loses his mind and loses everything at one point. So, sorry.
Yeah, no, I think that's fairly accurate in terms of the impact that some kind of a fully blown yeah, paranormal or yeah, otherworldly event could have on one's balance. I think that happens to most folk. It's kind of understandable, and that's also what makes it kind of dangerous because there's a lot of extremely crazy and heavily motivated people out there with their own agendas. And,
Who are sort of looking for an excuse to do something based on their agendas. But for you, you're obviously a visual artist. You're a filmmaker. Is getting the proof, is that ultimately the goal for you, or is that your main motivation, is getting the proof at this point?
I wouldn't say that at this point that's still my main motivation. I think that was my motivation back in the 1990s. I mean, basically, in the early stages of investigating the Rana affair, I was up in the castle of Montsegur in the French Pyrenees and saw an electrical storm where there were multiple bolts of plasma striking into the castle, which looked a bit like a big fiery hand with fingers which were reaching down to yeah, to presumably incinerate us. So we were all terrified. But then on about 8 years later, we came back and spent an awful long time with time-lapse cameras trying to capture the same thing, trying to literally photograph it. We went back with thermal cameras. So there was a point when I was directly chasing prima facie evidence of what was going on. But I think
Were you able to get it?
never really to my satisfaction.
Okay.
It's a slippy business, and I've never had the funding or the basically the academic backing to fully start chasing down some of the stuff I'd like to chase down. And if I'd been a deranged academic, I might have gone down a very different path. But I do think that it's possible to find quantifiable evidence of different phenomena. I think that you can find traces in brain waves of possession experiences and different altered states of consciousness, and there's kind of an unknown science at work behind a lot of the stuff. And I find the moment any phenomena, if it's even if it's a white lady, a ghost that manifests in a tower room, if it's repeatable, it starts to come into science. And the moment something's repeatable, you can start to study it. So. Yeah, I guess I've always been a believer in the Charles Fort maxim of extraordinary claims demand extraordinary evidence. And so, yeah, I've been driven, I guess, by trying to find demonstrable proofs of some of these things. But in more recent years, I've also just, yeah, given up on trying to document some of it. And I also accept that it's probably dangerous to do so. That we're still not living in a period where it's fully okay to really put the stuff about.
Well, it's almost like it's getting worse too. I feel like we're kind of going backwards in time in that regard, as information has becoming more and more open. It seems like it's getting more and more cinched shut. In the Otherworld documentary, it came out about 2013. So I think you were filming around 2012, and it was kind of around that whole 2012 vibe and everything. In the area since then, I'm sure all of that has calmed down, the 2012ness of it. But is there still an energy to that area? Is it still drawing people in, or was that a more concentrated effect of 2012?
No, it's continuing to pinwheel towards some kind of apocalyptic resolution, I think, which It's just evolved in ways that yeah, no one could possibly have imagined. I mean, so there are a number of reasons for it. It's because of the geographic isolation of the area, on one level, and also its underdevelopment. We're very lucky to be here in the Pyrenees, to be, yeah, pretty cut off from the mainstream of Western European life. We've still got a lot of wild forest and wild mountains and yeah, potent energies going on down here. And in the course of the last few years, with COVID, with the yeah, internet conspiracy sphere out of control. A lot of folk here in the zone, particularly during lockdown, have moved very far from reality at times, or at least the definition of reality has gotten yeah, extremely woozy. There were periods of time when people were genuinely thinking that we were being invaded by aliens, or that various people in the village were being replaced. There's a general sense that some kind of millennial change is taking place. The apparition in the castle and much of that material is linked to a prophecy, which basically fell due a couple of years ago, where this notion that the edifice of the Holy Roman Church will fall and that the old religion and the old ways will return, which was something which continues to boil under the surface, in the sense of the old gods wanting to remanifest themselves. At the same time, an opposition, which is kind of a corollary of yeah, a force of control, which is battling frantically to try to stop that from happening.
So when a prophecy comes and goes, what's next?
Well, usually the dates get revised ever backwards. Tradition,
Yeah.
yeah, the way it's dealt with, but some residue sticks around.
Yeah.
Continues to accrue. I mean, I think the first person out here to start talking about dimensional portals and the notion that the area would serve as some kind of refuge of the apocalypse was a lady named Elizabeth Van Buren, who was, I think, the granddaughter of one of America's least memorable presidents.
I was just going to say
Yeah,
Martin Van
The
Buren.
Van Buren boys.
yeah, Elizabeth wrote a book called yeah, Refuge of the Apocalypse, Rennes le Chateau, the key doorways to other dimensions, back in the early 80s. I think she was expecting the end of the world to be 1983 or 1987, all the way back there.
Wow.
Yeah, and she was long gone already by the time 2012 came around, when the whole when they declared a state of martial law in the area, and there was the whole UFO hysteria, UFO flap, which really resembled the closing reels of Close Encounters quite strongly.
Right.
Yeah, it didn't happen in 87. It didn't happen in 2012, but a general sense of, yeah, I guess incipient apocalyptic hysteria is, yeah, still present in the yeah, in the pattern, yeah.
And everything sort of adds to the folklore, the history of it, right? Like it just all keeps compiling and adding on.
Yeah, and there's a lot of folk with a vested interest in the prophecy,
Yeah.
in the White Lady, because this notion of the overturning of the patriarchal Roman Church, yeah, the rise of the goddess, or is very much in keeping with the current zeitgeist, and speaks loudly to yeah, militant feminism, and to I think also the Christian community, which is a strange mutation, but what we've seen down here is a lot of folk from different areas of the world, and taking a very strong interest in yeah, what's been happening in Montsegur, and this issue of the yeah, the White Lady, the apparition.
Have there been any other sightings by you or by anybody else since then?
They're
Since
pretty
the
constant.
Oh, okay, okay, wow.
It's ongoing. It's been pretty constant. It's there's a Danish gentleman, Lars Mule, who set himself up as a bit of a guru, who wrote a book called the O Manuscript, which I think he's just made a film based on. Who's been seeing the lady and the thing on the mountain for years and years, has his own take on it, but it's clearly the same apparition. We get multiple reports, every year. I had someone tell me that they'd been up on the mountain on the full moon in August, towards the beginning of August this summer, and had heard a voice singing, with the sound kind of phasing in and out, and then had seen the shadow of this figure walking down the east side of the castle into the courtyard, and I was able to go back and find some of the Occitan songs associated with the place, which then immediately rang a bell. So she still walks. There's still a force up there. And in the time that I've been here, I've also there've been numerous times when we've encountered what I could only describe as ghosts, or little psychic overlays of other time periods, and they're things I really didn't believe in when I was younger, but having heard them, on the side of the Ren Plateau, there's a tendency to hear horses' hooves, phantom horses galloping past when there's no horses, and the summer walking out there just after dark, heard horses galloping in exactly the place where people are always telling me that there was phantom horses going by. I've got no
Now, do you
reason.
think some of this is like, stone tape type of stuff where it's like sort of locked in, kind of repeating itself? Or do you feel like it has its own agency to it?
Well, that's one of the big questions. The multiple big questions is, is it, as in Nigel Neal's stone tapes theory, something which is just a memory recorded in the crystalline structure of the rock that's using our nervous systems as essentially as wetware to endlessly replay itself and replay its sensations, which it could be, but then that brings in the issue of how interactive is it,
Right.
and and what is how does it perceive us?
And because your interaction with it, I mean, how interactive was it on its end? Do you know what I mean? I mean, I know that what you've told on the documentary, but did it interact with you in the same way that you were sort of emotionally interacting with it?
Well, that's a big question. Is how does it perceive us, and how do they perceive us? I don't know. It is the answer. It's because there's also a level in which it's very hard to honestly believe anything unless one's got an independent witness. How much of it is going on, and how much we're molding it into humanly acceptable terms is hard to see. But I've also seen just lots of just little odd little things, like, for instance, someone coming up into the castle courtyard in the dark and putting down their pack when they're very tired, and their frying pan in the back of the pack hits a rock, and you see all these presences taking off in fright, without the person even noticing it. It's like, okay, they heard that. But I don't know how they were perceiving it. But are we their ghosts?
Right.
In some other world, are we haunting them? The how much we're interacting and how that's experienced, I really can't tell.
Well, I think it's important. I mean, I've had my own, experiences, and I've listened to other people's experiences. And I think at the end of the day, what's the most important is how the experiencer felt. I mean, because that's kind of all we have to go off of is what did your gut tell you, type of thing, and everyone's different. Everyone has their own different perspectives, but I think it's important to listen to the experiencer. I think it's important to believe the witness, and I think it's important to trust I think it's important to trust what the witness feels about what happened.
Yeah, I think it's only once you start examining multiple witness accounts and finding areas of commonality between them that it really starts to come into back into the realms of science.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
I think. Go ahead, please.
yeah, no, I've been fascinated by the amount of agreement between the all the different accounts, particularly with some of the well-established ghosts, like the phantom sentry that taps its stick on the front battlement, and different things that have been reported down through the decades by different generations, but still seem to be going on. The clinking of phantom hammers on phantom anvils that you can still hear on some sides of the mountain, which we've all heard, which seem to be coming from some invisible forge. Yeah, who knows when? Um, but yeah, the as the material builds up over the years, I've become much more of a believer, I guess.
That's
How can you
sounds
not?
because yeah, it's hard
mean,
not to.
but then there's this other side that keeps popping up in my head. I'm like, here you are, you have the Wi-Fi access there, fortunately, and there's a level of technology that seems to. I would think that is interfering ultimately with the connection, right?
It could be, but I don't know if it's as simple as a Ralph Bakshi type conflict between the forces of technology and
I like
That's
that. I like
we
that,
we
though.
love that movie. Thank you for referencing
one of my
that.
favorite films.
Oh,
I think where I go with this too, I'm like, okay, Corey and I both live in. I live in Santa Monica. He's up in Oregon. We live in relatively suburban, American neighborhoods with a lot of other energies going on around us. We're not living up on a mountain. But when you do live up on that, I went to Taos. I spent a lot of time in Taos, New Mexico, back in the day, and I was able to go to their Sacred Blue Mountain. Had to receive permission from the Taos government and the tribal leaders to go there, and the courtesy of a friend of mine. And remember going not too far from, town to this mountain and feeling things, being around things that I'd never felt before. This presence. And when you get away from the world that we know around us,
the distractions.
Right, you're more open to it. You start seeing these things. I don't know. It was just an interesting thought that passed through my head as you're describing these stories. And on one hand, you've got skeptical people that go, "Oh, it's just this or just that." No, but once you get away from all of just this or just that, there's a lot of truth there, I think.
Well, I guess some consensus realities, reinforced by all of our human structures.
Right.
We've pretty much flattened most of the planet through either industry or agriculture. So it's a few small mountainous pockets and areas that have been underdeveloped for various geopolitical reasons that have I guess retained some sense of this Lovecraftian otherness. The original non-human world. And
Right.
this notion of the great god Pan and panic, the sensation you feel when you're on your own and surrounded by primal nature. I think that's panic in its original usage, the proximity of the great god Pan. In many places, you've got your Bigfoot, your Sasquatch, and in Oregon. In far north Queensland and Australia, they talk about the bunyip, which no one ever sees the bunyip. And I say, well, how do you guys, even though it's there, if you never see it? And they say, because you get the fear, mate. You get the fear. Everything goes quiet, and you feel it. So I'm sure that the fear that the orcas get in far north Queensland, and this primal sense of panic of proximity to the unknown, or to whatever those primal forces of nature are, is probably the same thing. They've also got Bigfoot in Australia. They call them yowies, but they're also big hairy people who live out in the woods somewhere.
Oh yeah, I'm still trying to find one every time I go hiking up here in Oregon, but I think I want it too much, and so I won't probably get to see one. Richard, we want to be very, conscious of your time and everything. I do have one more question from our pal Cam on Patreon. He says he asks, what is your favorite character or creature in a movie that you've made? What is your favorite character that you've created for your films?
I think I like if there's a guy I wanted to spend more time around, it was Joe Niemand, Joe Nobody, the one-eyed drive-in projectionist in Dust Devil.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, who's fully deranged, but I kind of miss Joe. Would like to hear more from him.
Oh, he's a great character. He's the one that delivered the line that I love. That's fantastic. I love that movie. I love Hardware so much. Do you have anything you want to talk about that you're working on now? Anything that's coming out that you want to let everybody know about or anything?
Well, still beavering away on in the H.P. Lovecraft world, but beyond that, do have a book which is going to surface in the presumably within the next 6 months, because I've just signed a contract with Inner Traditions, who will be carrying the Last Crusade, the quest for SS Obersturmführer Otto Wilhelm Rahn, the true story behind the Nazi Grail hunt.
Awesome.
Yeah, finally coming into print. And that's largely because there's been any number of folk who have been trying to stop that story from getting out for a really long time. And I got tired of it, and I thought, this side of death, before anything happens to me, I wanted to put the whole damn thing between two covers and put it in the public domain. So,
Right on.
Yeah, so the Last Crusade is about to land from Inner Traditions in the US.
Oh, very cool.
Very cool. Oh, we said it at the same time. I was going to say, too, on a side note, your audiobook of Color Out of Space is fantastic. And I own several Walkmen, by the way.
It's right up there, by the way. It's right up the Color Out of Space audiobook's right up there.
I'd really like
the cassette tape.
Huh? Oh,
you have a really, I really appreciate your cadence and your style when you read. So as someone who loves audiobooks but also reading to my son, and it's a craft for sure.
Are you gonna do your book? Are you gonna do the audio version of it?
I guess that's down to Inner Traditions. But let that unfold. I think that could work.
And do you have do you have a dream book that you would like to narrate?
I certainly would like to read more of the Lovecraft material, and that I'd love to do Dunwich Horror, or to read some of the longer narratives. I'm also a huge Clark Ashton Smith fan, and in an ideal world, would like to do more of my own material. I hope that once the Last Crusade is out, I'll be freed up to write another one.
Richard, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I mean, it means the world to me and Zach. This was a dream come true, truly.
Oh man, I'd be happy to do it again. And it's been a pleasure. And send me a links to your breakdown of color. I'd like to see that.
We will have to continue our conversations of what goes bump in the night and why it goes bump in the night down the road. Yeah. So looking forward to that.
Yeah, sure to say so.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Take care. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Have a good one.
Thank you for listening to Podcasting After Dark's exclusive interview series with Richard Stanley. And, as always, thank you for your support.